Well everyone, it's time for us to talk about the Google Pixel 6 Pro and see how this specific phone holds up in 2022. Now what I will definitely tell you is this phone is completely worth it. I think it's been great and it's almost approaching 1 year old now. I think in the next 2-3 months it's going to be a year old, which is actually pretty insane because personally I think this was a great phone that Google made, and coming from the Pixel 5, this was the strategic move that Google made to make their phone stand out. I think in 2020 they had to drop the Pixel 4a and the Pixel 5 to kind of focus in on exactly where they wanted to go with the Pixel lineup. Were they going to make budget phones? Were they going to make extreme budget phones like the Pixel 4a? Or were they going to go back to the roots and make somewhat of a flagship phone? And I think with the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro, Google did a tremendous job. I think with the Pixel 6, for it being $599, I think that was a really good price tag. And for this phone being $899, I think this was also a very good price tag. I mean, you have to keep in mind, this phone, the Pixel 6 Pro at $899, is trying to compete with the S22 Ultra. I think it's trying to compete with the 13 Pro Max, and looking forward, it's probably going to compete with the 14 Pro Max as well. And those phones cost over $1,000. And for this phone to cost technically less than $900, but it's pretty much $900, that's a really good value. And also this phone, since it's been out for so long, has gone down in the used market as well, making this phone a pretty decent value even in the used market too. So if you don't want to spend, the $900 on this phone brand new, well, it's already available in the used market, and as this phone progresses even more, it's going to be even cheaper as well. I mean, some of these things are going around $550 to $600 in the used market in decent condition. So definitely keep that in mind. If you want to pick up this phone, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there. You can help support the channel at the same time. Now, on the outside of the Pixel 6 Pro, we have a beautiful display on the front. This is probably one of my favorite displays. I think the S22 Ultra probably takes the cake, but this is a very good display that, Google made, and I think that was a very smart thing that they did. I think the curved panel a little bit was beautiful, and I think that 6.7-inch AMOLED or OLED display with 120 Hz on it was beautiful, and that is another big advantage of this specific phone. Now on top of that, we had a USB Type-C port on the bottom, which was great, and on the back we had a few different colors we could actually choose from. So we can go ahead and choose from the standard colors, as most of us probably know. I think I have the white one, and some of you may have the other colors, but personally I love the colors that this thing came in. And you also have that triple camera setup on the back as well. Now I'm definitely going to tell you this phone has a lot of cool flagship type of features built in as well. You have, reverse wireless charging, you have that amazing camera setup, really good performance, and a lot of camera features built in as well. Now this camera on the back, like I said, it's a triple camera setup. You had a 50 megapixel, I guess it's technically a quadruple camera setup, but for this case, we'll just call it a triple camera setup. It had a 50 megapixel wide angle lens, it had a 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor, and then a 48 megapixel telephoto lens, and it also had that LiDAR sensor as well. Now, really, anytime I use this camera, I had a tremendous time with it, and I still think it's a very solid camera for sure. If you're trying to go ahead and, realistically, if you're trying to take, basic photos, you're going out in public and you're taking photos of people or whatever, this is going to be perfectly fine. My only gripe that I mentioned, especially in my Pixel 6 review, was that it was kind of a little weird here and there, mostly because of zooming in and zooming out. When you're in the camera app, even on the latest version of Android, even on Android 13, if you're zooming in and zooming out on the specific phone, sometimes it can cause a little bit of glitchiness. I had the same thing sometimes on my Galaxies as well. iPhones are the only ones who do it right. I don't know why it's iPhones and no one else, but essentially with Google's, they don't do it correctly, and it can be a little weird, so hopefully they improve that in the future. But the photos I've been able to get from this thing have been great. Videos are great as well. I think you can do 8K capability on the back, which is amazing. And the only issues that a lot of people had at the first time was pretty much with, now you can do 4K at 60 on the back, no 8K, so keep that in mind. I think I said that earlier. But the issue that I had, or a lot of people had early on, was that this camera wasn't really that great when it first came out, at least from what I was hearing from a lot of people. But with subsequent software updates, it looks like it's been improved. And for me, I'm not using my camera every single minute, so I don't really care too much about it. And I think all modern smartphone cameras are great, and there's probably less and less things that are different from phones nowadays than they've ever been before. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. But one of the best things Google did with this version of phone was with their versions of software and what they're offering with these phone software. Now Google did something interesting with these devices that they haven't really done before, which was release these phones with a new chipset inside. So with the Google Tensor chipset that Google made, these are basically their, silicon chipsets. This is what they're going to go ahead and spend a bunch of their time on, a bunch of their their money on. And I think over time, what they're going to try to do is make these chipsets so amazing and so important that potentially they can go ahead and bring these Google Tensor chipsets to maybe Chromebooks, to maybe speakers, to maybe any other device that uses a screen, even Google Home Hubs or whatever they have. And I think they're even going to potentially sell them to other device manufacturers. Imagine if Samsung starts using a Google Tensor chipset. Imagine if, any of these other Android manufacturers. Imagine if Snapdragon, imagine if they just go out of business because these Tensor chipsets are so good. Now, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I think that's going to have a long-lasting effect over time, and it's not going to be today. But one thing that Google did, just like they've done with, previous versions of software, is with improving their software versions. They're now actually giving us way more versions of software with this version of device than any other ones. So I think it's like 5 years in total with like 4 years of OS updates and an extra year of security updates or something. And that is really, really cool. The fact that Google, with all their, power and everything are giving us the ability of just using our phone even longer is super important to me. And I think that's one of the coolest things that Google has done. Is it the craziest thing ever? No, Pixels have notoriously lasted very long, but I like the fact that Google did this, and it's easily one of my favorite things that Google has done as well. Now, moving on to the performance side of things, as I've mentioned before, this is a really good performing phone as well. The Google Tensor chipset inside has been very good in my opinion, but on top of that, realistically, anything you're going to do from a performance standpoint, I think is going to be perfectly fine, especially for my, performance needs. I don't really use a phone like for crazy amounts of things. Like I'm not playing crazy amounts of games or anything like that. So with that being said, I think this phone is still a very good performing phone from that standpoint. And I think if you're going to be either playing super intensive games or you're not playing intensive games at all, I think this is going to be a perfectly fine phone for you. And for my opinion, like I've stated before, I've had great performance from a phone like this. And even if I personally am not using this phone to play Genshin Impact every single second, I think a lot of you will still have a great experience with it. And I, for one, I can recommend this phone more from a performance standpoint. I think the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 is still the faster version of, chipsets right now, and then followed probably by the M series of chipsets from Apple. But this is still a very good phone for sure. And especially when it comes down to the battery life, I've had a really good battery life from my Pixel 6 Pro as well. I would say it's definitely given me better battery life than my Pixel 6, which was surprising. But I think as of right now, this is still a very good, battery powered phone as well. And when it comes down to it, what I'll definitely tell you is I think the Google Pixel 6 Pro is very, very good for sure. I think it's still a very solid phone. And even looking forward, like I mentioned, for the next few years, this is going to be a phone that many people end up using for so long just because of the software versions. And I think when I have a phone like the Pixel 6 Pro, this is going to be a phone that I will probably recommend people to buy for many, many years from now. It's not going to be the perfect phone of all time, but I think it's going to be perfect enough for a lot of people to use. And honestly, I couldn't recommend this phone more. If in the next few years this phone ends up going down to like $200 or $300, that is going to be such a solid phone to pick up that I would honestly recommend buying it at that point. So all in all, that kind of covers it up for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, not only so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.